everybody. Let's get live going. There we go. Checking connection. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Previtt. I am one of two lead faculty for clinical management of the pregnancy and postpartum. Happy Monday. If you are living in Canada, it is either Family Day or Heritage Day, which means that many of us have a long weekend this weekend. So if you are enjoying some extra time with the fam, amazing. We've done the same this weekend. Before we get started, I wanted to talk to you all about our next cohort of clinical management of the fitness athlete, pregnancy and postpartum. We start March 9th. That is an 8-week online course where we talk about all things female athlete and as she transitions into her journey through motherhood. We talk about the female athlete preconception, go into exercise and pregnancy, labor and delivery, common pelvic floor dysfunctions. Then we go into the postpartum athlete. So we talk about return to gymnastics, return to running, return to strength-based sport, all that fun stuff. And so we are over halfway full. So if you are interested, we get started in a couple of weeks. We start March 9th. Okay, exciting. So today I wanted to talk to you about a topic that I've really actually been struggling with for quite some time, especially as I've taken this dive into pelvic health. And that is around how to talk about pelvic organ prolapse, or whether to disclose a prolapse if you find it on exam. Before we get started on that, if you are not in the world of pelvic health and you are not very familiar with what a prolapse is, pelvic organ prolapse is a descent of one or more of the pelvic organs towards the vaginal opening. One of the biggest risk factors is often having children and age in terms of presentation of symptoms, but can also be linked to things like ligamentous instability if you have a genetic condition like in sclerosis, or just a genetic predisposition to more laxity in your ligaments. This can also come into some of the pelvic supports and lead to a little bit more of a stress or strain on that system, causing that descent. It is also a common issue to happen if you have a chronic condition like a coughing related chronic condition. And so that can be something that is very common. When we think about pelvic organ prolapse, we often grade it in terms of how close to the vaginal opening it is. We often use a reference mark of the hymen, and it can go from grade 1, which is a very low amount of descent, all the way to grade 4, which means that it has descended past the vaginal opening and oftentimes can be palpated by yourself if you are the one experiencing a grade 4 prolapse, and can require things like splinting and things like that in order for you to be going to the bathroom or having a bowel movement. When individuals are experiencing pelvic organ prolapse, they often have things that they report like a bulging in their vaginal opening. They can talk about an ache or a heaviness that is in their vaginal pelvic area. There can oftentimes be pain with penetration and intercourse and can be heightened by the position that you are in if you are having penetrative intercourse. All of these things kind of come into play. However, what is also true when it comes to pelvic organ prolapse is that many people, this is why we kind of talk about it as like the bulging disc, and I've talked about this in the past, is it the bulging disc of the pelvic world? There is so many times where we can have absolutely zero symptoms of prolapse, but be experiencing a grade 2 or grade 3 prolapse. And this is where I start to get kind of having myself talk in circles about this. So here's 2 examples that I wanted to share with you that have continued to make me struggle with these conditions and what to do with these conditions. Number 1, I have had clients who I have told that they had a prolapse when I'm doing a postpartum assessment. And after finding out they have had a prolapse, they start getting into a very centrally sensitized state. They start to feel that bulging a lot more. They are chronically checking to see if their pelvic organ has descended further. So they're constantly looking in a mirror. They are concerned or have this kinesiophobia to be moving, especially in high impact, because of this fear that they are going to make their pelvic organ prolapse worse. So in that case, when a person comes and they don't have that many symptoms, you could essentially be almost like a catalyst for this central sensitization. On the flip side of that, when there's an ethical kind of gray area here around the need to disclose certain things. And it's kind of on this fence, right? Because you can do an assessment for somebody's knee and find some ligamentous laxity in their LCL, for example, and they're coming in with medial knee pain. You're probably not going to say, that's interesting. Your LCL seems a little unstable, because again, you know that can be something that is completely irrelevant. It is within the realm of normal, and can create issues with other joints or on the other side of a joint that is completely unnecessary. We're starting to see the same thing in pelvic organ prolapse, where we can almost assume with fairly good certainty, especially if you have had a vaginal delivery, that after 1 or 2 pregnancies, there will at least be a grade 1 pelvic organ prolapse. I almost consider that to be not necessarily an abnormal finding, but just some of the physiological changes in anatomy that occur when a woman has a baby. But again, it's like, how do you play this balance between when to disclose and when not to disclose? So on the other side of the spectrum, I was seeing somebody for a chronic low back pain issue. So had gotten rear-ended, was having pain, was working as a nurse. She has been going on and off to physio. She did a bunch of physio in the past. I had seen her a couple of years ago for some work hardening right before I went off on mat leave, but I only saw her once or twice. And then her care got transferred to a pelvic PT, actually, but was seeing her orthopedically. And she reported feelings of burning and frequency and just tension in her pelvic floor. And she had mentioned it to the pelvic PT, and the pelvic PT had kind of said, well, it just seems like it's probably just stress and you're holding a lot of tension in your system. Didn't do a pelvic exam, and that was kind of it. And so I'm seeing her 18 months later. This is kind of something that has been recurring. Now she's afraid that she can't work. All these types of things are starting to creep up. She's starting to get into that really sensitized state. And she mentions this to me, and I was like, well, you were being seen by a pelvic PT. Did they do a pelvic exam? Would you be open to the pelvic exam? And she said, no, but I would be totally open. I am a nurse. Like I'm totally fine with all that kind of stuff. I haven't had a kid, so maybe that was why they didn't think that it was necessary. Fast forward, we do the pelvic exam, and she's got a grade 3 prolapse. And as I started diving into her history a little bit more, she had a bout of about 4 months where she battled a chronic cough and pneumonia. And we started talking about what that meant, and we started talking about downregulating the system and relaxing. And she came back the next time, and I said, how do you feel? And she said she had almost tears in her eyes, and she's like, you have no idea how good it felt to feel like there wasn't something that was just wrong with me. Like I thought that I was getting chronic UTIs and I wasn't. And it was just, this was when it was really important to disclose. And now I have one other story where, again, I think it's important. So I have another person that I've seen who's on and off done pelvic PT for years. Her kids are 4 and 6, has wanted to be a runner. Her kids they love the trampoline. She feels like she can't do that. Has had deep hip pain and pelvic incontinence issues for years. I said to her, I'm like, have you had like a lot of these symptoms are pretty congruent with prolapse? I know you've done a bout or multiple bouts actually of pelvic PT over the last 5 years. She's like, no, I haven't really gotten any diagnosis of anything. And I just feel like I am failing. And I was like, okay, well, we'll do a pelvic exam. I'm going to tell you exactly what she's another clinician, so very informed. I said, sometimes we don't disclose because we are a little bit worried that it'll be something that you fixate on. I was very open. I was able to be very open in this interaction. And I was like, but I think it's important for you to be informed, and let's take a look. She ended up with a grade 3 prolapse as well, a urethral, so an anterior prolapse. And she has done so much pelvic PT. So she has done multiple bouts. She has done all of her Kegels, her pelvic floor muscle training. She has had the PeriFit. She has done all of these things. And she said to me, she was like, oh my gosh, like you have no idea how liberating it was to have this diagnosis, because I feel like I have failed this part of my life, and that I have been unable to come to terms with why I am doing everything right, and I have gotten no answers as to why I am still feeling this way. And because of that, and I knew her history, I was like, this might be an instance where it might be a good idea to get fit for a Pessary. And so a Pessary is essentially like a brace or support for your pelvic organs. It is a way for individuals with some higher grades of prolapse or very bothersome prolapse to get a bit of relief. And I'm starting to see more athletes who are using it as a support, because you can't necessarily change a prolapse per se. You can change some of the symptoms, but the descent can sometimes be tough to change, especially after you're a year plus postpartum. And in this case, I made the referral to someone who does Pessary fitting. She did the Pessary fitting and did some exercise that she loves to do that is very symptomatic for her in the office, and her symptoms had gone away. And I ended up getting this really long message from her that brought tears to my eyes. And she's like, you have no idea like how thankful I am that I have this diagnosis, because now I feel like there is something that I can do, and there is a way for me to advocate. In that case, having this diagnosis was liberating. It was not sensitizing. It was not fear-inducing, and it was really beneficial. But how do you know which side of the pendulum a person will be on? How do you provide the best quality of care, but know that some of your words may actually create this sensitivity in their nervous system? How do you have these conversations in a way that does not create fear? Because as soon as you say you have some of your pelvic organs that have descended closer to the vaginal opening, it can be very fearful. It can be very overwhelming. It can feel like something is going to fall out, that you can't do these things that you want to do anymore. It can feel like these activities are being taken away from you. And we know that that isn't true, but I am coming from an informed space to know that that isn't true. I am somebody who has been in this world for a long time and understand and see the variety of presentations and the way that this goes, very similar to what we are starting to see in the back pain literature with herniations, how we have a lot of people who are asymptomatic who have herniations on MRI. And so I think we're starting to see the same thing when it comes to pelvic organ prolapse. But how do we describe discogenic low back pain to somebody with an acute flare-up to not create fear? How do we disclose that you do have, like, part of the reasons why intercourse with you in supine is painful, but when you're in like a doggy style position, it's not, is because you have more of a posterior prolapse. Like, how do we have these conversations? And so I think it's very nuanced. And unfortunately, this is somewhere where I try to give a lot of clinical guidance. And in my mind, this is a total, it depends. This is you need to see the circumstances of the person that you're talking to and understand their history, understand their health literacy, and what this diagnosis will mean, especially depending on what they're coming in for. If they're coming in because they're having pain with intercourse and you find a prolapse that actually really explains it, and you can start talking about different sexual positions to alleviate that discomfort where that organ has moved more into the vaginal canal, that can be extremely helpful. And it can give a justification, not, oh my gosh, this is taking forever to heal, or oh, my vaginal wall tissue must be so fragile, which is sometimes what we hear. And so this is such a nuanced conversation, and I hope that I kind of made sense around where I've seen both sides of this pendulum swing in a good way and in a bad way. And I would love to keep having this conversation because I think it's an important one, and definitely something that we need to be aware that we can be very freeing by allowing almost, I don't want to say over medicalization, but having this medical diagnosis to explain why they are feeling like not themselves, versus like when that diagnosis can actually be harmful and when helping can hurt. So I would love to hear your all's thoughts. Have you thought about this? If you are in pelvic PT, have you struggled with this? When do you disclose? Like, what do we say? Like, when do we say it? How aware do we have to be? What is your communication like? I would love to hear all of those questions, or all of those answers rather, because I think this is an important conversation and one that we really need to be aware of as we are diving into this space. All right, I am off my soapbox. I would love to hear everyone's thoughts. I hope you all are having a wonderful Monday. We talk all things incontinence and pelvic organ prolapse, especially as it pertains to the athlete in our clinical management of the fitness athlete pregnancy and postpartum. I hope you all are going to join us in our March cohort. We are super excited. This is going to be our second cohort with our new material, and we are looking forward to having you all in that group with us. All right, have a wonderful Monday. I already said that, so I'm going to sign off, and we will talk soon.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to the PT on Ice Daily Show. If you enjoyed this content, head on over to iTunes and leave us a review, and be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram at the Institute of Clinical Excellence. If you're interested in getting plugged into more ICE content on a weekly basis while earning CEUs from home, check out our virtual ICE online mentorship program at ptonice.com. While you're there, sign up for our Hump Day Hustling newsletter for a free email every Wednesday morning with our top 5 research articles and social media posts that we think are worth reading. Head over to ptonice.com and scroll to the bottom of the page to sign up.